ads against me last time were George Bush, the war, my approval subsequently of both of those. I had never approved of the Iraqi war. I'd never been a fan of George Bush. I made that clear over and over and over. So that the negative ads were out there last time. And I think it's important, though, to realize that no matter what kind of ads you run, no one has an entitlement to destroying someone's personal reputation, impugning their character, or just out and out lying about them. In my case, they say that we somehow overcharge the government. Every media outlet that's looked at this has said that's ridiculous. It's not true. We have change orders. They've said I've been sued a half a dozen times. I was in business for 30 years. I did 2,500 projects. I had 450 employees over time. I worked on this very campus. We had third-party actions. We have never paid a dime out in a lawsuit. They were all dismissed. They were all a function of me being on a job with someone else who got sued. And then they go on to say that my uncle somehow gave us work when he was mayor. Of course, he's dead now, so he can't defend himself. But we have bid work for every administration in upstate New York in the Utica area for 30 years. It's all competitive. We were always a low bidder. Subsequently, we saved a lot of money for the people we worked for. As far as the ads I'm running against Mr. Arcuri, and I take responsibility for those as the end of the ad indicates, the characterization that we somehow warp his record, I think that's your word, right, Mr. Bach, is accurate. And the reason it's accurate is that his record in Congress is worth noting that the first 2 years he was there, when he never thought he'd have an opponent, Mr. Michael had just beaten Ray Meyer, he was 97.5% lockstep with his party. He is on the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee used to be called the Speakers Committee. So that what I'm trying to point out is simply that his record was that then, and he has done a mad dash to the center because I think he never thought he'd have competition in this race. So for a guy that was so partisan, and incidentally his current record is in the 90s also, he has defined himself as a New York moderate. He's even started his own party called the Moderate Party. My point is that you're right. I accept that criticism. But it's by way of pointing out, and I'm glad to have an opportunity to do it, that it doesn't mitigate the fact that we know where his loyalties are. We know where he was when he had no competition. And with all due respect, I suggest that that's where he will be. And that's why they put people on the Speakers Committee, because they're reliable. His record on the Speakers Committee is even a higher percentage. So we have never said, and the media have said this, we have never said an untrue thing. We have never lied. We have never impugned Mr. Arcuri's character. I've never said a personal negative thing about him. And for the record, I've never said a personal negative thing about Nancy Pelosi or President Obama. But I think that Mr. Arcuri resents the fact somehow that he feels as though he's running against me and I'm running against Nancy Pelosi. Well, there's a certain truth in that. I'm running against both of them because I feel as though his record proves that he is very much aligned with her agenda. So I don't like the ads. I think that it's safe to say that we both run a campaign that lacks the kind of substance that people deserve. I think it's lacked the kinds of issues that people want to hear about. These debates, when you wind up talking about issues like this, tell me what possible value that is to you. And the fortunes that are spent on these ads are obscene. The 527s that come involved are disproportionate, and they can be angry and vitriolic and ugly. And I don't watch TV because I don't like seeing the ads either. So, thank you.
Yes, a couple of points. I think and Mr. Hanna says, and he may be right about this, that he doesn't have anything bad to say about Nancy Pelosi or President Obama. Well, that's because he doesn't have to, because we have 527s who are constantly saying that. I mean, you turn the TV on and all you hear and all you see are those pictures. But I think we get sort of an impression of what this is all about. And I think just listening to some of the things that he says are very clear in the way that they're distorted. And it talks about my voting record. Well, fact of the matter is that John Boehner, who's the Republican leader, votes with Nancy Pelosi 65% of the time because, fact of the matter, most things that we vote on are things that both sides agree in. So I think it's a little disingenuous to point the finger one way and say that it goes this way but not the other way. And I would remind Richard that 2 years ago, one of the things that you said in your commercial about me was that I am lining my pockets with millions of dollars of taxpayers' money. These are the kind of things that are unfortunate, believe me. And again, I didn't begin them. And if it wasn't done, if it wasn't started, I would not. And in fact, you won't see another negative commercial by me for the rest of the campaign. We went off with them this week. We're just positive because I think people have had enough. But fact of the matter is, if you're getting hit with negative ads, you have to hit back with them. And I think one last point that I want to make that I think is very true. The commercials that we ran were proof. They were truthful. And the fact of the matter is, one of the points about it is Mr. Hanna complains. He had complained in the entire last campaign about the fact that I made my entire career off of taxpayer dollars. Well, the fact of the matter is that so is he, with respect to money that he received from contracts, many of which were while his uncle was mayor. So I am not criticizing the fact, we're just pointing it out, that in fact, government money goes to a number of different things. And one of them is to contracts to people who do construction work. And he has made a good deal of money as a result of school district contracts, county contracts, city contracts. There's not a problem with that. But if you can't accuse someone else of getting money being paid by the government when you yourself are being paid by the government. And that was the point of our commercials.
Yeah, I was a private businessman, a contractor. I've done thousands of jobs. Yes, for municipalities. Yes, for the state. Always the low bidder. Great work we did. Provided a lot of jobs for a lot of people. It's not about whether or not our money comes from the same place. As a matter of fact, most of the money I spent on the last campaign came from my pocket. If you really want to know it, you follow the money. Most of the money that was spent on Mr. Arcuri's pocket for his campaign was spent by large unions, over $800,000 for unions. And they complain about me contributing my own personal wealth that I've earned over 30 years to run a political campaign. And as far as Michael having contracts, we did make the criticism that while he was a DA, he owned the troopers' barracks. A clear conflict of interest, not illegal. We never said that. It is within the canons of the legal profession to deny yourself the opportunity to even have the appearance of an impropriety. Our point was owning the troopers' barracks was an appearance of impropriety. Not that it was illegal, but that was the simple case. And Michael, you still own those buildings, and that's fine with me. You're on the transportation committee, and you own the state garage on South Street, as I understand it. So, I'm not trying to say here that it's not my business how Mr. Arcuri makes his living. My point is our paradigms are different. I'm a private businessman. I've never served in government. I am not a career politician. I'm running against a guy who has spent his whole life, or most of it, in government. And yes, he had a private practice. But I ask yourselves this: is there a difference from a guy who builds his life from nothing, eventually employs 450 people, becomes one of the largest in terms of philanthropic work in the community, and loves doing it, and has been successful? Out of my own efforts, I am self-motivated. I got up at 4:30 every morning for almost 27 years, and I provided a product that people were willing to pay for. I did a good job, and the reason I'm comfortable today, and my wife is sitting here, we're blessed to be in this community and have what we have, is because I saved. I did the one thing that government doesn't do. When things were good for me, I put money aside and saved it. What does government do? When government is successful, it creates structures that aren't sustainable. It gives us back our own money and expects us to applaud them for it. That's my point. If you're interested in electing someone who's had a different life, an outside life, someone who knows and understands free enterprise, how value is created. And I'll tell you this, the growth of government is fundamentally incompatible with the success of everyone in this room. That's the way I think, and to some, you have a choice in this election. You have a clear choice. And you can, if you like the way things are going, you have that opportunity to vote for them. If you don't, you have a different opportunity. Thank you.
Before we go any further, I just want